The courtroom was supposed to be a place of justice, discipline, and order. But on that morning, it felt more like a marketplace ruled by arrogance. Officers walked around loudly, tossing files on tables, laughing, showing off their authority as if the entire place belonged to them. And then, a man walked in quietly. No entourage. No bodyguards. No spotlight. Just calm footsteps and a gentle presence. It was Manny Pacquiao. But dressed in simple clothes, head slightly bowed, carrying only a folded paper in his hand, he didn't look like a global champion or a national hero. To the officers, who measured people not by dignity but by appearance, he looked like just another ordinary visitor. One cop in particular, Officer Ramos, strutted around the courtroom like a rooster who owned the land beneath his feet. His uniform was spotless, his boots polished, and his ego towering. He noticed Manny standing near the front bench, patiently waiting for someone to assist him. Ramos scoffed loudly. "You," he barked. "This area is for official parties only. Move to the back before I move you myself." Manny looked up gently, not offended, just confused. "I'm here for a hearing, sir. I have a summons." Ramos laughed. "You have a summons? You?" He snatched the paper from Manny's hand without asking. "Probably fake. People like you walk in here pretending to be important all the time. People like you." Those 3 words echoed through the room like an insult dipped in poison. Manny didn't react. He didn't raise his voice or defend his status. He simply waited, calm as ever, because he had been disrespected before. He understood pride. He understood insecurity. And he knew the world often misjudged quiet people. But Ramos wasn't done. He walked closer, stared directly into Manny's eyes, and smirked. "You look familiar. You one of those men who try to imitate celebrities on TikTok? Don't waste my time." Another officer laughed under his breath. A few people turned to look. A few whispered. Some pulled out their phones. "Phil." Manny remained silent. Ramos shoved the paper back into Manny's chest. "I told you to move. Don't test my patience." "I just need to confirm the room number," Manny replied softly. The softness of that voice triggered something dark inside Ramos. Maybe he thought Manny wasn't scared enough. Maybe he felt his authority wasn't being respected. Maybe his pride demanded more dominance. Whatever the reason, he snapped. Before anyone could blink, Ramos raised his hand and slapped Manny across the face. A loud crack echoed through the courtroom. The room instantly froze. Silence swallowed every corner. Hands paused mid-air. Voices died. Movement stopped. Manny didn't move. He didn't push back. He didn't glare. He simply absorbed the hit with a surprising serenity, as if he had been trained his whole life to face storms without blinking. The entire courtroom stared at him, shocked, not because they recognized who he was, but because he took the slap without anger or fear. Ramos puffed his chest. "That's a warning," he growled. "One more word from you, and I'll throw you out myself." Manny slowly lifted his gaze. His cheek was red, but his eyes were calm. "Respect is not given by force," he said quietly. "It's shown by choice." Those words hit harder than any punch. But before Ramos could respond, before the shock in the room could fade, before anyone could understand what was unfolding, the courtroom doors swung open. A woman walked in. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a presence so sharp that every officer instantly stiffened. Straight posture, confident steps, eyes that scanned the room with authority. No one knew who she was yet, but within moments, she would be sitting in the judge's seat. And everyone, especially Ramos, would learn the truth too late. The sun rose lazily over the city court building, casting long golden lines across the marble steps. Morning breeze carried the usual sounds, shuffling papers, distant honking, hurried footsteps, but inside the building, the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. It buzzed with noise, tension, and the unmistakable arrogance of people who believed uniforms made them superior. Inside courtroom 4B, officers moved around like they ran the entire judicial system. Some leaned against the walls with arms crossed, chatting loudly about weekend parties. Others bragged about minor arrests as if they'd saved the world. Files were tossed carelessly onto benches. Chairs screeched. Footsteps echoed sharply. It was a kingdom of ego rather than justice. And ruling this little kingdom was Officer Ramos. He didn't just walk, he strutted. His chin high, his chest puffed, his boots clicking sharply against the floor as if each step was a reminder of his power. His voice carried across the room not because he spoke loudly, but because he wanted everyone to hear him. Every command, every insult, every correction was delivered with unnecessary authority. "Move those chairs." "I said move them, not admire them," he barked at 2 junior officers. They scrambled instantly. Ramos scanned the room like a king inspecting peasants. He loved the morning shift. He loved the authority. He loved watching people, especially those who came in quietly, feel small. And then, someone entered who couldn't have looked more quiet, more humble, or more unimportant in Ramos' eyes. Manny Pacquiao stepped through the courtroom doors silently, carrying a folded white paper. No entourage. No protective circle of security. No cameras. Just a simple man in a plain jacket, wearing worn-out shoes, his face calm, his pace slow. To most people, he was a legend. To Ramos, in that moment, he was just another ordinary visitor who didn't know the rules of his courtroom. Manny stopped near the front benches, as if unsure where to go next. He didn't want to disturb anyone. He simply wanted to ask for directions to his hearing room. His posture relaxed, his expression gentle, his presence almost invisible. But in the world of arrogant men, humility is like a magnet, drawing unnecessary hostility. Ramos spotted him instantly. He walked toward Manny with heavy, commanding steps, each one louder than needed, letting everyone know he was about to assert his dominance again. "You!" Ramos snapped, pointing directly at Manny. His tone wasn't a question, more like an accusation. Manny looked up politely. "Yes, sir." Ramos gestured toward the back of the room. "This is not a fan meet. This is a courtroom. Move aside before you block someone important." His voice dripped with sarcasm. A few officers snickered in the background. Manny nodded calmly. "I'm not here for anything like that. I have a summons. I'm just trying to confirm the room." He held out the folded paper. Ramos didn't even glance at it. Instead, he stepped closer, invading personal space, eyes narrowing as if trying to identify him. "A summons? You?" He laughed openly. "How many people walk in here pretending to have business with the court? You think we're stupid?" Manny didn't argue. He didn't correct him. He didn't raise his voice. "I just need help finding the right courtroom," he replied, steady and respectful. But that respect didn't soften Ramos. It irritated him. Because men of insecurity despise calmness, they crave fear. Ramos snatched the paper from Manny's hand without permission. He barely looked at it. "Fake," he declared instantly, waving it dismissively. "People like you need to stop wasting my time." Again, those words. People like you. The courtroom wasn't full yet, but enough people were present to catch the officer's tone. A few turned their heads. Some raised their brows. One woman near the witness stand frowned at the unnecessary hostility. But it didn't matter. Ramos was in his element. He pushed the paper back into Manny's chest. "Move. Now." Manny stepped aside gently, but still tried to speak. "Sir, the paper." Ramos held up a hand aggressively. "I said move. Don't make me repeat myself." Something in his eyes flashed, not duty, not discipline, but ego. Pure ego. Manny looked down, took a breath, and stayed silent. His years of discipline had shaped him into a man who didn't need to prove himself with words. Ramos turned away, but cast one more mocking glance over his shoulder. "You're in the wrong place, buddy. Go sit with the spectators. Maybe you'll get an autograph from someone actually important." The arrogance in that single sentence filled the entire room. Manny simply walked to the side and sat quietly on a bench. A few people whispered, "Why are they treating him like that? Does the officer not know who that is? He's being so rude." But no one intervened. Because that's what arrogance does. It freezes the room and silences the good. "Before we continue, tell me honestly, The courtroom settled into an uneasy rhythm after the earlier tension, but every few seconds, Officer Ramos glanced at Manny Pacquiao with the same irritated curiosity of a man who felt his authority being challenged simply by someone existing calmly. Manny sat quietly on the side bench, hands folded, his summons paper resting on his knee. He wasn't trying to get attention. He wasn't trying to cause trouble. He was simply waiting, patient, composed, and unbothered. But patience is a language arrogant people don't understand. Ramos saw Manny raise his hand politely to approach an assistant clerk for direction, and that, somehow, infuriated him. He stormed across the courtroom. Boots pounding. Jaw clenched. Eyes filled with the kind of fury people feel when their pride is threatened by the gentleness of someone else. "Didn't I tell you to sit down?" Ramos snapped, grabbing Manny's forearm suddenly and aggressively. The grip was harsh, too harsh. Strong enough to make any ordinary man recoil. But Manny didn't pull away. He didn't flinch. He just looked at Ramos with a calm that made the officer even more enraged. "I don't want trouble, sir," Manny said softly. "I only need to know where my hearing is." Ramos squeezed harder. "Trouble? You think you're important enough to cause trouble here?" He leaned in, voice dripping with cruelty. "You're a useless man trying to act important." A few people gasped quietly. A woman in the back whispered, "Why is he talking like that?" Another shook her head, uncomfortable. But Ramos didn't care. Authority made him fearless. Or so he thought. Manny gently lifted the paper in his other hand, trying once again to show the official summons. "This is not fake," Manny said. "Please just read it." Ramos swatted the paper out of Manny's hand with a sharp slap. It flew into the air, fluttering like a wounded bird before landing on the floor near the jury box. The room froze. Even those pretending not to watch now stared openly. Ramos stepped closer. "So now you're telling me what's real and what's fake. You think you can come into my courtroom and order me around?" Manny didn't step back. He didn't raise his chin. He just said, calmly, "I'm not ordering you. I'm simply asking for basic respect." Those words hit Ramos harder than any insult could. His face darkened. "Respect?" Ramos repeated. "You're not worth a second of my respect." And before anyone could react, before any clerk could step forward, before common sense could interrupt pride, the officer's hand swung through the air and struck Manny across the face. A slap so sharp it echoed off the courtroom walls. The sound was unmistakable. Violent, humiliating, disrespectful. Everyone froze. Telephones stopped buzzing. Footsteps halted mid-step. Voices died instantly. A pen rolled off a desk and fell to the floor unnoticed. Every single person in that room felt the shock. Even those who didn't know who Manny Pacquiao was could feel the injustice burn through the silence. Manny's cheek turned red instantly, but he didn't move. His jaw didn't tighten. His fists didn't clench. He didn't glare with anger or straighten up with pride. He simply stood there, still, composed, unbroken. Ramos smirked triumphantly. "That's what happens when you test me." A junior officer whispered, "Sir, that was too much." Ramos silenced him with one angry glare. Manny then slowly lifted his gaze. His voice was soft, but it cut through the air like a blade made of truth. "Power isn't in your hands," he said. "It's in your character." No shouting, no threat, no anger, just truth. And that truth shook the room more than the slap had. Ramos hesitated for the first time. Something in Manny's eyes, calm yet piercing, made his confidence flicker. The arrogance in his posture wavered for just a fraction of a second. People in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably. A man whispered, "This officer is going too far." A clerk murmured, "Why is he so calm after being hit?" Someone near the front bench said quietly, "Who is this man?" The air in the room felt thick, heavy, electric, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something explosive to happen. Ramos straightened up again, trying to regain dominance. He grabbed Manny's collar this time, yanking him slightly. "You think your little lines mean something in court?" Ramos growled. But the moment he tightened his grip, The doors of the courtroom swung open. Not gently, not quietly, but with a powerful authority that instantly commanded attention. Every head turned. Every officer straightened. Every whispered conversation died in a heartbeat. A woman walked in. She was calm. She was confident. And she carried a presence that didn't need a uniform to command respect. Her steps were controlled. Her expression unreadable. Her aura unmistakably powerful. Ramos' grip on Manny loosened. Because even he felt something shift. The entire courtroom sensed it. Someone important had just arrived. And within moments, she would sit in the judge's seat. And everything would change. The courtroom didn't just go silent, it collapsed into silence. A heavy, electric stillness filled the air, as if the entire room forgot how to breathe. Even the buzzing fluorescent lights seemed quieter. Manny Pacquiao stood in the middle of it all, calm as a monk, his cheeks still red from the officer's slap. He didn't touch his face. He didn't argue. He simply watched the doors swing open. Every lawyer in the room reacted instantly. Chairs scraped. Pens dropped. Several attorneys pushed themselves to their feet so fast they nearly tripped. A row of young paralegals froze mid-whisper, mouth still open. Even the senior prosecutor, a man known for never reacting to anything, stood up straighter than a cadet facing inspection. The only two people who didn't move, Manny, and the rude officer who had slapped him. The officer exhaled sharply through his nose, annoyed by the sudden drama. "TCH. Relax, people," he muttered under his breath. Probably some clerk. But nobody else seemed to share his confidence. The two older officers beside him tensed their shoulders. Their hands instinctively dropped away from their belts, not in readiness, but in respect. As if someone had entered the room who deserved a clear path, no matter what. The rude officer noticed their posture and scoffed. "What's wrong with you two? She's just a woman walking into a courtroom. You don't have to act like she's the president." But then it happened. The moment she stepped fully into the light. Every officer except him went stiff. Uniforms straightened. Chins lifted. Several officers actually saluted without hesitation. A few civilians gasped softly, though none of them dared speak. The rude officer's smirk faltered, only slightly, but he recovered quickly, muttering, "Huh. Must be some fancy lawyer. Big deal." Still, a tiny bead of sweat formed near his temple. There was something different about her. She didn't walk, she glided. Every step she took was measured, confident, unhurried. She held no papers, no briefcase, nothing that declared rank. But somehow, her presence spoke louder than any badge or title. Manny simply folded his hands in front of him. He smiled, a small, knowing smile, as if everything was unfolding exactly how he expected. The rude officer noticed. "Why are you smiling?" he snapped. Manny didn't answer. He didn't need to. Across the room, whispers spread like wildfire, soft, frantic, confused. "Who is she? Why are the senior lawyers standing? She outranks judges. No way. Is that really her? Why is everyone acting like royalty just walked in?" One young intern covered her mouth in shock as if she recognized the mysterious woman instantly. Her friend tugged her sleeve, whispering, "Wait, do you know her?" The intern shook her head rapidly. "I don't know her, but I've heard stories." The rude officer rolled his eyes, louder this time. "Oh, please. She's probably just the judge's assistant or some overhyped attorney." But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his voice. Because the woman wasn't looking at anyone else. Not the lawyers. Not the spectators. Not the bailiffs. Her eyes were locked on him. The one who slapped Manny Pacquiao. Her expression did not change. No anger. No shock. Just a silent, unshakable authority, the kind that made grown men shrink without a word. The officer swallowed. His throat clicked loudly in the silence. Something was wrong. Very wrong. For the first time since the confrontation, he stepped back. It was small, barely noticeable, but everyone saw it. Manny didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't say a word. He stood like someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. Then someone finally whispered the sentence that froze the rude officer's blood. "Why is everyone saluting her? Who is she?" The officer turned sharply. "Saluting? They're not." But they were. 3 officers stood at full attention. 2 lawyers bowed their heads respectfully. Even the bailiff, usually expressionless, stood straighter than a soldier on parade. The rude officer's face paled. His confidence cracked. He looked back at the woman, now only a few steps away. Her presence felt like gravity itself had thickened around her. The entire room watched her with wide eyes, as if they were witnessing something impossible, something they never thought they'd see. She didn't glance at a single person. Not even Manny. Her footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate, powerful, as she walked past the security officers, the lawyers, the entire stunned courtroom. Then she reached the front. She did not stop at the tables. She did not stand near the jury box. She did not wait politely for the judge. Instead, she walked up the steps. The rude officer's jaw dropped. The lawyers held their breath. The courtroom leaned forward as one, 100 hearts pounding in their chests. And then, without asking permission, without hesitation, without fear, she stepped straight onto the judge's bench. The entire room exploded with shock. But Manny simply exhaled, calm and peaceful, as if justice had finally arrived. The woman didn't just step onto the judge's bench. She claimed it. With a slow, commanding grace, she lowered herself into the judge's seat. Not a single person in the courtroom dared to breathe until she settled into the chair as though it had always belonged to her. The transformation was instant. Court officers snapped upright. Lawyers straightened their coats. Even the murmuring civilians fell silent. Something monumental had shifted. The rude officer, the same one who had slapped Manny Pacquiao moments earlier, felt his spine lock. He blinked hard, trying to understand what he was witnessing. This wasn't normal. This wasn't expected. This wasn't some random official walking in unannounced. This was power. Real power. A senior attorney, pale as paper, whispered to the colleague beside him. "That's her. The newly appointed high judge. The one appointed just last week?" "Yes. She outranks every seated judge in this district." The words cut through the courtroom like a blade. The rude officer swayed where he stood, his confidence crashing down like shattered glass. "High judge. Not judge. Not chief judge. High judge. The highest legal authority in the entire region. And he had just slapped a man summoned by her order." The high judge finally lifted her gaze, her eyes sharp enough to silence nations. She scanned the courtroom once, then pointed directly at Manny. Her voice was cold, clear, unmistakably authoritative. "This man was summoned here by my order." The officer's jaw fell open. A gasp rippled across the gallery. Manny didn't react. Not even a twitch. The high judge continued, her voice steady, unshakable. "You." She turned her head toward the rude officer, her finger extending slowly, deliberately. "Assaulted a court-invited guest." The air vanished from the room. The officer stumbled backward as if her words physically struck him. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. No excuse. No defense. No denial. Only fear. The kind of fear that grows when a man realizes he has crossed someone he should never have crossed. He tried to speak anyway. "Why, Your Honor. I didn't know. He didn't say. I was only trying to." Silence. One word. Softly spoken. Yet it hit harder than any shout. He shut his mouth instantly. The high judge turned back to Manny, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, her expression softened. Not with pity, but with respect. "Mr. Pacquiao," she said gently, "thank you for your patience." The room froze again. She knew his name. She had summoned him. She had been expecting him. And everyone else, especially the officer, realized too late what they had done. Manny bowed his head slightly, still calm, still composed. "I understand," he said quietly. "Character must be tested." Her eyes warmed. "And yours," she replied, "remains exceptional." Then her voice sharpened once more as she straightened in the seat, reclaiming the full weight of her position. "Justice," she declared, "begins now." A tremor of anticipation rippled across the courtroom. The audience leaned forward. Civilians clenched their hands. Even the lawyers seemed unsure of what would happen next. The rude officer looked as though the ground beneath him had tilted. He kept glancing around, hoping someone, anyone, would defend him. But nobody did. He had mocked a man he didn't recognize. He had slapped someone summoned by the high judge herself. And now, the entire courtroom was waiting to see what punishment she would deliver. The high judge lifted her chin, eyes locked on the trembling officer. She didn't speak yet. She didn't need to. Her silence alone was enough to break him. He swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his back. Manny, standing peaceful and unmoved, watched the unfolding moment with the kind of quiet dignity only real champions carry. The high judge's next sentence would decide everything: the officer's career, his reputation, his future. But before she ruled, the story pauses, and the audience gets the choice. The moment where justice is served. The high judge's silence stretched across the courtroom like a storm cloud. Everyone could feel the weight of the moment pressing against their chests. The rude officer's legs shook so violently he could barely stay standing. His confidence, the arrogance he carried when he slapped Manny Pacquiao, had completely vanished. He tried to speak, voice breaking. "Why, Your Honor, I didn't mean, I thought he was just, you see, he..." "Enough." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. The single word cut through his excuses like a knife. The courtroom flinched along with him. She leaned forward in the judge's chair, eyes locked onto him with chilling precision. "You handled your authority like a weapon, not a responsibility." He opened his mouth again, but instantly froze when she raised her hand. "No more explanations. You do not get to justify assault. Not in this courtroom. Not in this country. Not in my presence." Two security officers from the back stepped forward slowly, waiting for her command. The rude officer's throat tightened. He suddenly looked small, not because of his uniform, but because the illusion of power he hid behind had collapsed entirely. He whispered, "Please, Your Honor, don't do this." She didn't blink. "You were entrusted with law. Instead, you humiliated a peaceful citizen. You struck a man who had every right to stand here." Her gaze flicked toward Manny, calm, composed, solid like a mountain. "Remove him." The command echoed through the room like thunder. The rude officer stumbled back. "Your Honor, please." But the security officers had already taken his arms. He struggled for a second, then stopped when he realized the entire gallery was watching, not with sympathy, but with silent judgment. For the first time since he entered court that morning, he understood what helplessness truly felt like. As they dragged him toward the exit, he kept looking back, trembling, desperate, wishing someone would defend him. But no one did. When the doors shut behind him, the courtroom exhaled in relief. The high judge turned her attention to Manny. The room shifted, from fear to reverence. He stepped forward with calm steps, hands behind his back, humility still shining through everything he did. He didn't look angry. He didn't look vengeful. He looked steady. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "I don't want revenge." A hush fell over the courtroom. "I want respect to be taught." His words floated through the air with the weight of years of discipline behind them. He didn't speak like a man wounded. He spoke like a man guiding. The high judge's stern expression softened. "Manny Pacquiao, you've shown more patience in these few minutes than most people show in their entire lives." He bowed his head slightly. "Patience is what keeps strength honest." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. Then her voice firmed again as she returned to her full authority. "The officer will face disciplinary action. Not to destroy him, but to correct him." She looked across the courtroom, making sure every soul heard what she said next. "Justice is not about humiliation. It is about accountability. Today, that accountability has begun." People nodded. Some sighed in agreement. Others lowered their heads, realizing how easily arrogance can blind a person. The high judge stood. "This session continues, but Mr. Pacquiao." She paused, giving him a look of genuine respect. Your dignity has already delivered the most important lesson of the day. Manny gave a small smile, not proud, not angry, simply grateful the moment was resolved without unnecessary destruction. He turned and began walking toward the exit, each step quiet yet powerful. The gallery parted like the sea, allowing him through without a single word spoken. But their silence wasn't emptiness, it was admiration. When he reached the doors, an elderly court clerk whispered softly, "Now that is what real strength looks like." The doors opened. Manny stepped outside. The light from the hallway washed over him, and with it came the final understanding that echoed inside every person who witnessed what happened. Respect isn't earned through force. It is earned through character. And Manny had proven that character louder than any slap ever could. The courtroom behind him would never forget the lesson. Justice had been served, not with anger, but with dignity. The courtroom felt different after Manny Pacquiao walked out. Not louder, not chaotic, just thoughtful. Quiet in a way that only truth can make a place quiet. People looked at each other, and then at the empty doorway where he had just disappeared. The echoes of what had happened still hung in the air like soft thunder, not violent, but unforgettable. The high judge stood for a moment, hands placed gently on the bench. Her eyes moved across the room, studying each face, the lawyers, the clerks, the civilians, the officers who remained. None of them looked the same as they did an hour ago. And that was the point. She spoke, not for protocol, but for purpose. "Let today be remembered," she said, her voice steady, "not because a man was disrespected, but because a man chose dignity over anger." Heads nodded slowly. Her words poured into the room like a slow, cleansing rain. "Respect," she continued, "is not something you show only to uniforms or titles. It is not something given only to the powerful or the known." She paused, letting the truth settle deeply. "It is something you show to everyone, especially when you think they are nobody." A murmur of agreement swept across the room. Some people lowered their eyes, ashamed at how quickly they had judged. Others clenched their hands, recalling moments when they themselves had acted with arrogance. The high judge continued, "One moment of arrogance can destroy years of authority. One moment of disrespect can expose the truth behind a badge or a uniform." Then she lifted her chin, strength radiating from her posture. "But one moment of humility." She smiled gently, remembering Manny's calm, his patience, his quiet strength. "Can change an entire courtroom." People felt their hearts pull in that moment, because they had witnessed it firsthand. They had seen how calm could defeat cruelty, how character could overpower rank, how dignity could silence even the loudest arrogance. She looked toward the gallery, toward the people who had watched everything unfold from their seats. "Power," she said softly, "is not dominance. Power is character. And today, character won." Her words weren't just directed at the courtroom. They were meant for everyone listening, everyone who would hear this story, everyone who had ever been disrespected, everyone who had ever been underestimated. Because the truth was universal. The strongest people are not the loudest. They are the ones who stay steady when others lose control. She gave one final look at the now empty space where the arrogant officer once stood. "Let this be a reminder," she said, "that authority does not make a person great. Behavior does. Respect does. Character does." The courtroom was silent, not out of fear, but out of understanding. And in that silence, a collective lesson took root. A lesson the rude officer had learned too late. A lesson Manny had lived his whole life. A lesson the high judge had just delivered with both justice and grace. When she adjourned the session and the gavel struck, the sound carried a deeper meaning. A closing of arrogance. An opening of awareness. People filed out slowly, whispering, "She was right. Respect really is strength." Manny taught everyone today. That officer will never forget this. This courtroom won't either. And they were right. Some lessons fade. This one wouldn't. Because anyone who had witnessed the exchange, anyone who had seen Manny's quiet dignity, the officer's collapse, and the high judge's wisdom, would carry that moment for the rest of their lives. Outside, the sunlight hit Manny Pacquiao's shoulders as he walked away, calm as ever. Not triumphant. Not bitter. Just peaceful. He hadn't fought back. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't humiliated the man who humiliated him. He simply stayed true to who he was, and that was enough to change the atmosphere of an entire courtroom. And that is the deepest truth. Respect is not weakness. Respect is strength. Respect is power. So as the final message of this story lands in your heart, remember this. You don't need titles to be respected. You don't need fame to be recognized. You don't need power to be strong. You just need character.